Podcast. We're so glad that you have joined us today. We're excited to be starting season 3. That means we have been podcasting now for 1 year, Dad. How about it?
And just like that, we are back. So excited about a brand new year. I'm looking forward to what God is doing with us. I'm really excited about the things we hear that God is doing with some of you. As we've been gone these last few weeks, I travel around the country, and I'm asked nearly every stop along the way. Somebody says, whatever that thing is that y'all doing, keep doing it because we like it and we are following you. And so we appreciate your loyalty, and let's have a great 2022 together.
So we're in a series right now on Sunday mornings at Conroe Church called Good Habits. And we were talking about how we wanted to kick off Hope for the Soul this year, and you mentioned just going through this series. So for the next few weeks, I don't think we'll do the whole series here, but we'll touch on some good habits. And these are good habits. They're deep habits. This isn't just wake up early and have a good routine, but this is spiritual. This is soul food, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, Dad.
I think that we all know at the first of the year we laugh about the resolutions, but none of us really argue the fact that certain self-disciplines are good for us. Taking off a little weight, eating correctly, some exercise, and other disciplines are incredibly important. I have really enjoyed the last few Sunday mornings, first off, because the pressure for the Sunday morning is not upon me, and I'm so happy that it's you that's preaching on these Sunday mornings right now. But I've really enjoyed them, and one of the things that really started my mind to working and helping me think forward, especially about hope for the soul, was a statement you kicked off a couple of Sundays ago when you said that some people stop living long before they die.
Oh.
And I've seen that so many times when people have, for some reason, there was an event, there was a loss, there was something that happened, and they stopped right there. And then there are those that I've observed that have lived a long and a good life, and they stopped living in 1985 or 1997. That was the best moments of their life, and everything that goes on today, they tend to compare and use whatever that event was, whether it was good or bad, and they continue to live in that moment. And when you mention that some people stop living, I don't think it's wise to stop living and just reside in a place.
Yeah, I think it's easy for us to become prisoners to our past, whether it be victory or failure. Sometimes we can worship our past, sometimes we don't worship it, but we can't move past it because of emotional pain or physical pain that was caused that has caused us to just lock in a certain frame, a certain time frame in our life and in our mind. So I think the first thing we need to say is the habit that we're talking about today is we need to get in the habit of changing our story, not getting caught in the past, but allowing the Holy Spirit to cause change in our heart that allows us to look up and also beyond our current circumstances or our past circumstances. So I guess point 1 today would be we have to learn to let go.
Oh, we must release yesterday, good or bad.
Right.
Because God put us all in this moment that we live in. If you are hearing us today, you are living in the year of 2022. And whatever event may have taken place 5, 10, 15 years ago, of course God allowed those things, and those things define us, but we can't stay in the midst of that definition. If you're still alive, if you're still on this earth, I believe God wants us to take yesterday and live today to its fullest.
Right. I think it's important for us to realize that we have to own the pain in our life, because if we don't own that pain is going to own us.
Absolutely. We've had great loss in our family, but also we've had tremendous victory. And I think what you're saying, that if we don't own it, it owns us, and our decisions. No, the old saying is, you make a decision, then your decision makes you. The things that have happened to you, if you don't take ownership, they will rule your mind.
That's right. Job, I forget what chapter in Job, but it said his friends sat with him on the ground for 7 days and 7 nights. And a part of us grieving, a part of us letting go, is by surrounding ourselves with people who will stick with us through thick and thin.
It's been extremely important to me that whenever I have a friend or a brother that is in trouble, that I think we've talked about it here, that we run towards the fire. Just this week, one of your dear friends had a tragic loss in their family. And as soon as we were notified about it, it was my advice to you, Trent, drop everything and go now. And it made for a long day for you, but your friend was in trouble. Your friend was in a moment of crisis. And friends run toward a friend when they're in crisis.
Yeah, I think a lot of times some people withdraw, and it could be because of things maybe problems in their own mind or in their life, emotional hurts that they haven't dealt with. But sometimes it could be well-intentioned. Well, I'm just going to give them space. And while those intentions are well, sometimes we confuse giving space and giving grace. And we need to allow people grace to grieve, but we need to remember the biblical way of grieving is Job was surrounded by people who sat down with him on the ground. It doesn't say they talked. It doesn't say much, but they sat down with him and they allowed him to grieve. And I think we need to remember, and maybe just take mental note of this today if you're listening. If you're listening, is you never get over the loss of a loved one. You may not ever get over the loss of maybe no one passing away, but a relationship that went south that you hoped would never go south, whether it be marriage or just friendship. You may not ever get over those things, but by the help of the Holy Spirit, you can get through the grief that you're facing today.
Many times people say, well, I just don't know what to say in those moments. Here's a little secret. If someone is in trouble, they're going through a crisis, they're grieving, whatever the circumstance, if you just show up, you don't have to say a word. The very fact of your presence is statement that you are there, that you love them, and you're with them, and you've got their back during this challenging moment.
Right. I think it's important, too, that do you remember that time, I don't know, I think it was Easter time, you bought all the kids in the church a chicken. You remember that?
Oh, absolutely.
And there was a couple left over, so Redona wanted one or two. You remember one of those baby chicks died, and being funny, I think we went over to the Weldon's house, actually, and we had a funeral, or the Weldons came to our house, or I forget, but somehow the Weldons were involved in the story, and we had a funeral for this chicken. And it was goofy, and we were being so silly, but, I mean, I think it's on video somewhere. But I think sometimes when things die in our life, we need to stop, and we need to have a funeral. We need to call the family around. Look, this happened. This mistake went down. Or maybe you literally go to a funeral and you grieve. But if it's not someone passing, you need to call people around and be like, look, this happened. We're going to own it. But then we're going to try our best to move forward, and we're not going to get stuck here.
Notice something too. If you have gone through something and your process of healing is progressing, and then you do happen to see someone who might not have been present with you during this whole process, many times you bump into people who know that you've gone through something, and they try to say a few words, and their grief process over the loss is probably not as far advanced as yours. And when you're already at a point of growing past this, of healing and moving forward, and someone tries to take you back to the moment of loss, or take you back to the crisis, you're beyond that. If you could understand that your grieving and your healing is more advanced than theirs, you're further in the process, you can literally minister to them when they're trying to offer comfort to you.
Right. And I think that's why we need to honor the memory of days gone by, or honor the memory of loved ones who have passed. We've had death in our family a lot the past couple of years with just crazy circumstances. And I think we need to honor those memories, never forget those memories. But once we make up in our mind we're moving forward, we need to let some things rest in peace. We need to let some things die. We need, I think, probably one of the most influential books in our life is Henry Cloud, Necessary Endings. Sometimes we have to let go of some things, not because they're bad, but because in order for us to move forward in all that God has for us, we have to let some things end in our life. Still giving honor, but it's time to move forward.
Absolutely. You've got to be willing to allow pruning to take place in your life. And when a season in your life is past, there are people that God puts in your life for certain seasons. And just because a season changes and for some reason those people are now more distant, that's okay. They're good people. They're not bad because they're not in your life. You have to understand that some relationships are seasonal.
Right.
And others are lifelong. And then those relationships that are seasonal, they're there and then they're gone. And you have to just be thankful to the Lord that certain people were allowed in your life for that point in your life. And if they're not growing and going the direction that you're going, you'll see a bit of a separation. And that's fine too. That's normal, because there's other people in your world that are growing in a different direction than you are, and you're the one that's not there.
Yeah. I guess this is important to remember. Everything in our past is preparing us for our future. The relationships, the pain, the victory, it's all preparing us. And God doesn't waste days. There's no days that he wastes, especially the bad days. He forms us, he molds, he's building character in us. That's why it's so important that you just start living. Maybe you've been living in the past. Maybe you haven't been able to live in the past or in the present. You're depressed. You're down and out. Start living today. The power of the Holy Spirit can help you start living. But first, the first step in your new journey of life is you have to embrace the difficult situations that you are facing today. And then you can't let the dream inside of you die because the struggle's outside of you. So many times we let what happens around us dictate God's calling, or it doesn't dictate God's calling, but how we respond to God's call. I think it's important that we never forget what Paul wrote. We are to fight the good fight of faith. And sometimes it's not easy, sometimes it's difficult, but refuse to let the dream in your life die because of the circumstances around you. If God has given you a dream, pursue it, don't let go, and watch as God unfolds his plan in your life.
And indeed, God does have a plan for you. When you consider, say, the life of Jacob, who had dreams, and he had met great resistance with his dreams. And the resistance seemed to continue and continue. He'd get a little hope, and then he'd be back in the darkness of disappointment. But when he actually did live his dream, and his brothers were standing around him in fear, having bowed to him as the governor, he was living his dream. And when he realized in all reality, he began to weep. And I think that's the moment that it comes to him that I've been through a lot, but this is a real moment.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
This is a real moment that my dream is coming to pass, and it's an humbling thing when dreams start coming true.
It was the adversities that Joseph went through that made him who he was. It wasn't the good things. Oh, he liked to look back, I'm sure, and remember the coat of many colors, but that wasn't what made Joseph who he was. What made Joseph was the fact that he was betrayed. What made Joseph such a man of high character was the fact that when he was lied on, he still stood strong. And so he wasn't successful just because he got lucky and made it through problems. No, he was he was successful because of his problems.
If you look around, we're talking Joseph, and Joseph wasn't on our plan to talk about today, but we're talking about Joseph, and Joseph had he had a Potiphar put in his life. He had a Potiphar's wife who would falsely accuse him. He had 2 men in prison that were put in his life. And a lot of time it seems like our dreams are going awry, but there are people in our pathway. And Joseph would have never made the governorship if he hadn't had false accusations from a beautiful woman. If he hadn't come face to face with 2 men in a prison who had been put out of the king's palace, and he had to face the reality of who he was and what was going on. But it was the people in his life that literally, the baker who went back to the palace, he was the one who literally facilitated Joseph's journey from the prison to the palace. And never underestimate the value of the people that you meet in this journey.
Wow, that's so powerful. I think we need to have big vision. That goes back to what we were just talking about, is don't let the circumstances outside dictate the vision and the dream that God has given us inside. We all need giants in our life. Joseph, without the big obstacles that he faced, he wouldn't have been Joseph. Think of David and Goliath. Without Goliath, we don't know David as we know him today. The children of Israel possessed the promised land. Now, it was quite the journey to get there. They took for granted the miracle, the manna that God had given them every morning to eat. They complained about it. They wanted to go back to Egypt, all of that. But had there not been in Egypt, had there not been slavery, had there not been all the events that really go back to Joseph, that's how they all got there, is had there not been in Egypt, there would have been no need for a promised land. And we have to have big vision, regardless of the circumstances we face. That's why we have big vision here at Conroe Church.
Here at Conroe Church, we've had seasons when things were big, when things moved forward, when the reports that went out of here were incredible. Mm-hmm. We've also had seasons when that things weren't good, and we've had more people leaving than were coming. We've had seasons when finances were not good. We've had seasons when there was pressure and there was stress. And with those seasons, we had to realize that this is but a season. Mm-hmm. And weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. So whatever season that you are going through, consider yourself in an airplane. And that airplane is running down the runway, and it lifts off, and it hits a cloud bank. And you're going through a cloud bank, and you can't see anything around you. You're in the clouds. You may hit a storm, and that journey may get rocky. If you can continue to seek the face of God and continue to ascend to the glory of God, there will come a point where you will have a breakthrough. Yeah. And when you break through, I've just written something this morning about Jephthah. Jephthah's, the definition of his name is one who breaks through. And there are moments in life, there are people in life, there are seasons in life that you will have a breakthrough from a most unexpected source. And I'm really excited when I see those breakthroughs happen. And I'm really sad. I'm really unhappy when I go through a season when I'm not having the breakthrough. But when it happens, how sweet it is.
Right. I think so. We're talking today about changing our story. Sometimes we want God to do the supernatural, but we don't want to do the natural. So there's some things that we have to do. And one of those things that we have to do is we have to have faith that God is going to change our life. God is going to turn our circumstance around. And today, no matter what you're facing, have faith that the problem isn't always going to last. Just like you talked about a few minutes ago, the season that we went through, we have to have faith that this season is just that. It's a season. And there's a better day coming. There's a brighter day coming. We might not know when. We might not know who's going to be in our life. We might not know what it's going to look like. But we have to have faith that God is doing it. You know, think about the children of Israel. They were enslaved for, 400 years? Then they wandered around the desert for 40 years. A lot of that wandering, they were already delivered. They were already freed, but they weren't free in their mind yet. Whenever you've been enslaved for so long, it's hard to break past the paradigm in which we think. And I think today you just need to realize that maybe you've already been delivered. Maybe your circumstances already changed, but you need to now lift your faith to the level that will allow you to see, or allow God to reveal to you that your story is changing before your very eyes.
There's an old saying that Moses got Israel out of Egypt in just a few days, but it took 40 years to get Egypt out of Israel. And when you are in these moments of dreaming and hoping and taking control of your life, you may have to let go of some of the thoughts and some of the things from yesterday. You may have to say, okay, I am not taking Egypt with me when times get tough. And you look back over your shoulder like Israel says, oh, back in Egypt, we had leeks, we had garlics, we had different food. It's easy in the middle of the battle to miss what used to be and not realize and not understand that you had leeks and garlics. What was that? That was pickles and cucumbers. Did you really put the value of pickles and cucumbers above the value of heavenly manna in the moment?
Wow. That's why we have to live. We say it like this all the time, and we joke about it as our family, is we're following the cloud. The children of Israel, they literally followed the cloud. You know, God had provided, but we have to have faith that he's going to provide. And the last thing I want to talk about is the fact that so many times we forget that we belong to Jesus. Like, Dad, me and you, we're leaders. We're doing a lot in our life right now. But at the end of the day, we're just God's children, and we belong to him.
Look around the people that you find and you admire the greatest. And some of the most successful people are the most genuine people. Look at great leaders, and you find them down to earth. I was privileged one day, and this has been so many years ago, but the very first Sam's store that opened in Houston, we were given a VIP pass to attend, and actually were able to shake hands with Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart. And we were young, and how we got there, we didn't really understand. But it was a pretty heady moment for us. Here we were, early 20s, and we were shaking hands and meeting what was to be the wealthiest man in the world for some time. Still his family, even with his company divided into his children, those 4 or 5 kids are still all in the wealthiest of the world. But here is a most successful man who was genuine, who was down to earth, who could shake hands with the most common of us and not in any way make us feel small or little. And people that you come in contact with, the greatest of successful people, you will find they are extremely genuine, because they understand they're where they are because there are thousands of other people that are working with and beneath them to help them rise up.
We were at a store yesterday, and Kayla, she smiled and she pointed at a lady, and I just, okay. And then after I walked past her, I realized who it was. Well, it was a lady by the name of Cindy Cruz Ratcliffe. Well, if you're a worship leader, you know that she is like the premier worship leader. I mean, she's paved the way. I mean, she helped guys like Israel Houghton become who they are. She leads Lakewood's music still at this time. And so we just passed by and smiled, and we were on the same aisle. And then she she passed by and said, "Excuse me," and there was really no conversation. But when she walked by, I was like, "It's so amazing." I told Kayla, I said, "It's so amazing how real and how humble a lady like that is, shopping up Marshalls when she could probably shop at a lot of other places." But I think it's important for us to realize that the truly successful people, they're truly humble because they've gone through so many battles that life and maybe spiritual attack, or however you want to phrase that, it's knocked a lot of the jagged edges like arrogance and pride off of them. And go ahead.
The genuineness of someone that's living their dream, it sends my mind right back to the story of Jacob, where we just talked about Joseph, when he is standing there looking at his brothers weeping, and he realizes, I'm living my dream.
Mm-hmm.
People who are actually have arrived at the point of living their dream, they realize how lonely it is at the top.
Yeah.
And people who are literally at the top and are living their dream, they, like Joseph, will look at their brothers and say, there's room for you here in the middle of my dream. Come live in my dream with me.
And if you're fighting that good fight of faith, I think we must never forget that there is no shortcut to success.
Everybody loves the good testimony. They want the money, but they don't like the test of the testimony.
Yeah. The young guys in college, they want to be entrepreneurs and drive the fancy cars, live in the nice house, but sometimes they don't recognize the hours of preparation, the hours of sacrifice that go in, the long days at the office when they still have the nice house and the nice car. Or maybe you're a Bible school student today and you're listening to this. You want to have a big ministry, or you want to pastor a big church and do a lot of big things in the kingdom of God. I think it's very important for you to pause right now and realize that there's going to be some serious physical battles and some serious spiritual battles, but there is no shortcut to success in your life. And I think in the middle of all that, in the middle of the battles, you can't forget what God says about you and what God has called you to do, because sometimes people pay the price, but while they're paying the price, they get distracted because the sacrifice is so great, or the hurt that they go through. And it's not that they're not willing to pay the price. They're willing to pay the price, but sometimes we lose focus and we don't fulfill all God has for us, not because of our sacrifice, but because we just looked the wrong way. We looked right or we looked left when God was still saying, come to me. Look, I've still got this great plan for you. And it's that's a whole nother rabbit trail, but I think it's just important that you never lose your focus.
I want to say in our closing moments today that probably the definition of success, the roadmap to success can be summed up in two words, such as hard work. But persevere and never become weary in well-doing.
That's right.
And if you're in pursuit of a ministry now, or you're building a company, or you're creating or making and forming a team, understand you will face conflict. You will have moments that you have to sacrifice. There will be times when you pay everybody else but yourself. Yep. There'll be times when everybody goes home and you work the weekend. There are those areas of sacrifice, but persevere, hang in there. At the end of it, if you own what you're going through, and you follow through, and you go through the trial, and you pass through the test, and you arrive at the moment when your dreams are starting to come to pass, then you can celebrate what God has done, celebrate the goodness of God, but yet you're going to take others with you. And then you can help other people's dreams come to pass as well.
You'll wake up and your story will have drastically changed. Hey, everybody, thanks so much for tuning in today to this episode of Hope for the Soul. We are back. We're going to be running hard the next few months. So come right back here next Friday or whenever you listen to this. And we can't wait to be with you again. Once again, leave a review. Subscribe if you're on YouTube, share if you're on Facebook, or maybe text the link to a friend if you're listening on Spotify or